Hey everybody, it's JJ and we're back again for another ASUS PCDIY hardware live stream, breaking a 101. And definitely for those of you who joined us actually in last week's live stream for 100, thank you guys so much. Right now, just finalizing actually getting our little Gleam applet, which we'll have for the actual community. So if you're interested in actually winning that cool chassis that we actually showed off, not the white version, but the standard Hyperion, we actually are going to be giving away for the actual PCDIY group. So if you guys are interested in that, then make sure to go ahead and watch out for that post. It'll be coming in probably the next few days. We will have it coming up there shortly. So pretty excited about that. Cool thing about this stream is actually there's not going to be really that many new items. Actually, no really new items. I'm going to touch on a couple of actually products that have actually just announced in terms of actually getting listed online in terms of availability, including our brand new ASUS Aura ROG Gold ATX 3.0 series power supply, a couple of cool promos that we have going on, I think one or two giveaways that we have, and then actually focus a lot of the time actually seeing if we have actually any questions or comments. Maybe I'll pull some comments from the PCDIY group, see what we actually have going on in the stream, and we'll go from there. And hopefully at the end too, we'll be able to cover some cool builds in terms of the ASUS PCDIY Builder Spotlight. Of course, it's always cool to be able to check out what you guys are doing. So hopefully everybody is having a good Friday, staying safe, staying healthy. Things are hopefully cooling down where you're at, but let's go ahead and see who we have joining us here on the stream. So joining us here on the stream, see, we got a little bit of everybody. We got Tech. Hey, how you doing, man? Thanks for joining us so much. Got Picard 205. Oh, so this is the debate. If you guys are fans of Star Trek, which is the best series? You know, are you a fan of Discovery, Voyager, Deep Space Nine, TNG, the classic, right? What's it gonna be, right? Strange New Worlds, right? So no spoilers. I'm still watching season 2 of Strange New Worlds right now. So we'll go from there. We got David joining us as well. Fantastic to have you. We got also Daniel joining us, man. Thanks so much for joining us as well. We got Mike Russo, Sue Min, of course, the one, the only Mr. Sue Min joining us. Of course, Michael all the way from up north in Canada joining us. And let's see, one more. I think we got another Michael also joining us as well, man. Fantastic. Happy to have you joining us here on the stream. So thank you so much. So before I go ahead and kick it off, let me just go ahead and tackle one question. Let's just go, since this is actually the Q&A stream. We'll go ahead and we'll jump into one question first and foremost, and we will go from there. So Michael asked a question. Hey JJ, when will there be more BTF-based motherboards? When will follow-up for the ROG Maximus Z690 arrive? Maximus Z790 Extreme arrive? And will there be a BTF Hyperion? All right, so it's actually multiple questions there. So let's go with the first question is, when will there be more BTF motherboards? So I think that's a little bit of an interesting question, right? When we talk about BTF in general, I think I showed this off last time, guys, right? So let me go ahead and see. I think I have some images here so I can show you guys. So just for context, if you guys are not aware what actually Michael is asking about here, he's actually asking about our motherboards that essentially feature hidden connectors, right? So if you're looking for, a facade that doesn't have necessarily cables that are going to be visible, we do actually have a design initiative that we call BTF, and we actually have a website that we just recently finished putting up for BTF. So here's an example actually of a BTF motherboard. I talked about this in the last stream. Here's an ATX version. The prior version that I showed off was actually a micro ATX based version. So when will we see more? I don't have 100% specifics for you. Rest assured, you'll see a formalized announcement. We'll probably have a dedicated stream. We'll have a lot more information specifically when kind of the BTF ecosystem gets ready to push out. As I touched in the last stream, right now, the way that we see this is kind of a supplemental type of option as part of our overall product portfolio. So it's not designed to replace the entirety of the product portfolio. It's designed to supplement it and allow for essentially a new option for PC DIY builders and enthusiasts. So in that respect, as far as when we will see more boards, it really comes down to really what the adoption looks like, what the feedback is going to be like. And so right now it is looking for North America that will most likely have our primary focus initially be with under the Tough Gaming lineup. Not let's say with ROG, and as opposed to that micro ATX based board which I showed previously. So if we go over and we take a look at the micro ATX version right here, we're actually going to most likely be launching the ATX based version. But this gives you an idea essentially of how really nice the system can look, right, where you don't see pretty much any outward cables. The other kind of unique aspect is of course going to be our specialized connector right here, which is designed for up to 600 watts for supplemental PCI Express power. That's why I say supplemental, because of course your standard slot does provide some power, right? But this is essentially the primary power for your graphics card, right? But you don't have essentially that 12 volt high power interface that you would normally have on a traditional graphics card. So just make sure, stay tuned, probably more information for BTF coming in early Q4 timeframe. So yeah, that'll be encompassing everything, not only for, let's say, the motherboard, but for the graphics cards, for our chassis, and also even partners, where we have already had a couple of partners that have actually signed up with us, such as Thermaltake and Silverstone, who are actually going to be working with us in terms of the BTF initiative. As you see right here, this is a fully kind of integrated system because, of course, when you go with BTF, the chassis does have to have actually interoperability design specifically for that motherboard. Okay, so something to keep in mind there. All right, so moving over to the next question is, when will there be a follow-up to the ROG Maximus Z790 Extreme? Actually, I talked about this in our refresh preview. We've actually got a little bit more to talk about when it comes to Z790 refresh motherboards, but there actually will not be a refresh for the Extreme. So if you're kind of looking for the highest end-based motherboard, just make sure to keep it tuned. You'll maybe see some stuff that'll be interesting and cool in the not-too-distant future when it comes to refresh motherboards that we have under our Z790 lineup. I think, though, for the vast majority of users, the Hero, which we did show off, the Z790 Dark Hero, is going to be a fantastic board if you're looking for a high-end enthusiast-based offering. And then last, will there be a white BTF Hyperion? Definitely no plans right now for any Hyperion or ROG products under the BTF initiative. Right now, most likely for North America, like I said, our focus will most likely be with the tough gaming-based lineup. But like I said, we'll have more details in that respect coming a little bit later in early Q4. So make sure to keep it tuned in that respect. All right. All right, guys. Again, this is the community-based Q&A stream. We're going to tackle a lot more questions, and if you got questions in there regarding BTF, it's fine. Feel free to drop them in there, but I want to go ahead and just get a couple of the basic things out of the way in terms of just some general information for you guys. So first and foremost, we just have actually some UEFI BIOS announcements. Actually, a pretty big wave of updates. So I will be passing this information over to Jake, our community manager, for the actual PCDIY group. So if you guys actually want to get the entire kind of list of all the motherboards that have updates, then you'll see the featured post announcement inside of the ASUS PCDIY group. If you guys are checking us out on Facebook or YouTube, you can see the link for the PCDIY group linked in the chat, or if maybe somebody can, they can drop the actual link in the chat as well, or maybe I can go ahead and drop it in there in a moment, and we'll go from there. Updates are going to be for AM4 and AM5, so you can see there for chipsets such as B550, A520, X670, and B650, and there's actually a little bit of a legacy security-based update there for H610. For the AMD side of the fence, I'm going to go ahead and just use a reference example board, so let me go ahead and bring up a board here for reference, and I'll show you the update. This does contain new AGISA, and so as I always tell people, anytime you have new AGISA, this is continuing the rollout of the new AGISA that's been issued by AMD, where you have version 1007C, I believe, if that is the build. Always keep in mind that at this point already, I would say that actually the platforms AM5 is actually feature stable. I haven't seen any issues in terms of reliability and stability with actually the prior release. I've tested that actually across a number of different motherboards under our Prime series, Tough Gaming series, ROG Strix, ProArt series, ROG Hero series. It's done great. The main benefit of the most recent updates are generally kind of helping to maximize some additional MRC, some memory reference code that AMD has issued to be able to enhance some DRAM divider support. This generally will allow for potentially higher DRAM-based overclocking, but your rules in terms of how DDR5 scaling works still is going to be a factor, such as your port table, which means that your rank, your density, and the number of channels that you have are going to affect your DRAM scaling, so that is still going to be a factor. And ultimately, because there's a little bit of change in terms of how some of the linkage is going to be working at running higher memory dividers, I still think for most users the nominal target for an overclocked, not stock, but an overclock configuration is still going to be really probably 6000 MT with modified timings. So you won't really see any change in that regard, but if you're somebody that's a tweaker, tuner, maybe likes to kind of push the envelope a little bit more, then you may want to consider maybe the new UEFI release. Beyond that, it's not going to be a requirement in terms of overall kind of functionality, stability, and of course the max SoC voltage implementations have been there now for some time, so really actually since late April. So it's again not a critical item if you've already updated to that UEFI release. Now if you did not update to that and you have an AM5 platform, you would definitely want to do that. So here's a reference example. We can see we have the ROG Strix B650E-E. I'm just using this as a reference example, but you can see right here, it has the new AMD AGISA 1007C. You would go through, click the download, and you'd be good to go. We'll have also another full post that's in the PCDIY group that has a whole range of FAQs. So I have everything from like, should I upgrade? Should I not upgrade? What do I want to keep in mind? What happens if I have my systems overclocked? What happens if I have RAID? There's a lot of really good questions that I have already kind of predefined and answered for you in that. So if you have more questions regarding kind of the process or aspects of updating your UEFI, I strongly recommend checking out that post. So altogether, I think there was maybe something like about 90 updates. So actually a pretty good chunk of updates when we account for the B550, so B550, A520, so those AM4 motherboards along with the AM5 motherboards, and then like a little bit of a sprinkling, like I said, of some of those legacy Intel-based motherboards. None of them on the high-end side, so unless if you're not running like an H-series chipset motherboard, you don't need even to worry about those legacy ones. Like if you're running like Z590, Z490, you know, Z390, Z170 or something like that, you don't need to worry about going back and checking about this. So it's not a relevant update. All right, so let me go ahead and just see if we got any responses that might have came up there in the stream. So let's see. Somebody said TNG. I mean, yeah, next generation, man, it's pretty awesome. Oh man, that's pretty hard. Like I think the feeling of TNG, but I think even the story progression actually I think is even better in like Deep Space Nine, take for instance, because like there's a whole kind of narrative there, and there's kind of like the interesting kind of dynamic too, that you know you have a fixed kind of station, and so there's some really interesting stuff. But each one of them really impart really really interesting, I think, narratives, of course, within that worldview. So really cool stuff. But I definitely agree. A huge fan of TNG. Hey, Soren. Hey, Nordic 3D joining us as well, man. Fantastic to have you here. I think it's been a little bit since you've had them for the stream. So fantastic. Thanks for joining us. Hey, Liquid House, one of the best builder and modders in the game, man. We got a couple of people joining us, man. Fantastic to have you here. Thank you so much for joining us here on the stream, right? So very, very cool. Michael also notes DS9 is my favorite, then Enterprise. Yeah, so I mean, it's crazy, right, when you watch Enterprise, because Enterprise is technically kind of the most, let's say, viable to us as far as feeling, and everything feels so interesting. It's like I remember I was watching it with my fiance, and like the most apparent thing that you're watching is the doors don't automatically open, right? Because in every other Star Trek's like right, you get the doors automatically opening, and she was like, man, it seems so old school. Where it's like even now, like we have things where like doors can automatically open, but yet they didn't have doors. It felt almost like a flying submarine in a weird way, but it was cool to be able to see the kind of that early kind of formation, right? We're pre, of course, the Federation, and so kind of many things. It was a very cool narrative too. So cool. Thanks for some feedback there on that, guys. We covered our UEFI BIOS updates. We've got actually one giveaway here that we are going to go ahead and touch on. So let me go ahead and bring this one up quickly here, guys. So we do have a giveaway. And let's go ahead and touch on this one. So right here, we've got an ROG Intel Gamer Days giveaway. So this one I went ahead and started a little bit towards the end of last month, and I'll be running until the 3rd. So that's right. You guys only got 2 days left to go ahead and get it on it if you want to. So make sure to go ahead and do that. You can see right here, we've actually got some nice pricing right there. So we've got everything from a Tough Gaming Z790 Plus motherboard, our Cosmic Wave t-shirt in white, our ROG Archer backpack, the 17-inch. So that's the big one. That one's actually really cool. It's really quite a nice quality backpack. Tough Gaming LC240, that's our ARGB AIO cooler under the Tough Gaming lineup. Another actually ROG backpack, the BP1505, so that's a little bit more kind of compact unit. The GT502 chassis, and then also another backpack. So pretty cool, man. Some nice little giveaways to go ahead there. And if you're not in on it, man, get in on it. So let me go ahead and drop that in the chat, and you guys can get in there. All right, so have dropped that one in there. Let me go ahead and see right here. I would agree. I actually really like Strange New Worlds. I really like the kind of the vibe. It has like a cool kind of mix of futurism there, but kind of almost like a little bit of a nostalgia vibe to it. I think it's really well done, and the captain is really well played too. Tech Troublemaker, man. Hi, fantastic. Happy to have you here. Hopefully you're not going to cause any trouble for us in the stream. Let's go ahead and see. But let's go ahead and keep moving this along. So that covers us for the giveaway. All right, very, very cool. So next up, I'm just going to quickly touch on just a promotion page that we have going on right here. So this is nothing crazy, but a quick promo page. In alignment with kind of the back to school thing right now, we do actually have a promotion page that has gone up. So our back to school 2023. And so you can see we actually have categories for like laptops, gaming, display, motherboards, graphics cards, peripherals, chassis, all kinds of stuff. And you can click on those links and you can see actually where you might be able to save some money if you're interested in some of those items. So I think those are always cool. So let me go ahead and drop that one in the chat there as well. All right. Ooh, time for Star Trek Hyperion with warp drive fans. Yeah, that would be pretty awesome. I mean, just I actually think it would be really cool to be able to see something. I think on the Prime series, which already kind of has a basis for kind of space themed design, and it actually a lot of what we do in terms of kind of the typography, the design language, the silhouette, a lot of elements that you see like on Dual Series, on the Prime series product, it's space inspired. So I would think it'd be really cool to be able to see something like that. But I could definitely see how the Hyperion's got some of those sci-fi type of vibes. So pretty cool, pretty cool. All right, so that covers us there. So let's go ahead and go into the next item. So this is just going to be a little quick thing. You guys might have seen it there in the background wallpaper. I'm going to tease it a little bit more because it is going to be coming in the not too distant future. But I just got some of our cool scenario images for the actual upcoming Hyperion in white. And so, of course, as you guys know, we've spent a lot of time and effort to be able to design and develop an ecosystem that is really comprehensive when it comes to white components. Everything from white chassis to white graphics cards, coolers, fans, motherboards, peripherals, right? Really the entire gamut. Really, I think overall we have really the most comprehensive ecosystem in that respect. And it is actually a big challenge. There's a lot of aspects that can be difficult when you actually go about producing white, but it's pretty exciting to be able to offer a very kind of comprehensive portfolio. And now that kind of being taken even further with the white Hyperion, where of course we also have the Helios, which is in a silver, which I think looks great, and we have also the GT501, which is also in white, the GT502, which is also available in white, and then the AP201, which is also in white. So actually for a lot of our chassis, we've done a dual color scheme available. But let's go ahead and take a look at these couple of these little scenario images because I think they look pretty sweet. There we go. So we've got a beautiful display in white. I'm actually going to touch on a new update that I've got, just a little bit of soft update. I said that there was no new products, but I've got a little bit of soft update for you in terms of actually update to our monitor under the PGRG Swift series that will have a white variant coming out shortly. So if you're interested in that, you're good to go. You can see right there, we've got, of course, the ROG Falchion in white. We've got our ROG Harp Ace AIM-Lab Edition in white, the Hyperion, which is also in white, the ROG Strix series card, which is in white. That power supply, I don't know if that one's the Aura Strix in white, which we actually do have an Aura Strix version, which is planned in white. It's not yet 100% confirmed for the North American market, so if you want to see it, let us know. Let us know that you want to see it. I actually had a post about it in our ASUS PCDIY group, and then you can see, of course, our most recent cooler there with the ROG Ryujin, which also is available in white, and then you've got that beautiful Apex board, which is available in white, but it's no longer available, but we do have other motherboards in white. So overall, you can still have a fantastic ecosystem. So overall, a very, very cool vibe that you have. I love the bold, distinct styling that we have on the Hyperion. Of course, it is a big chassis. It's got a lot of room to be able to play around with, whether you're going for a more kind of traditional build or you're going with, of course, water-cooled build, or you want to go horizontal or vertical. Hashtag team horizontal for JJ as opposed to team vertical. I don't mind it. You know, I know there's a lot of people that like vert mounting, but I prefer horizontal mounting. But overall, a great looking chassis, and it'll be here in the not too distant future. So let me know your thoughts. Are you a fan? Are you excited about the upcoming ROG Hyperion in white? I think it'll look pretty cool. Hey, Justin. Fantastic, man. Thanks for joining us here, man. And yes, hopefully I'm going to be following up with the product marketing team in a little bit. And hopefully in the not too distant future, maybe next stream. I don't know if it's going to happen. But hopefully within the next month, I will be having an SL400 to be able to set in here and to be able to take advantage of our nice ROG gaming chair. All right, let me go ahead and quickly just see if we got any quick questions there that might have came up. I guess the nacelles would have to be external. I think Michael's noting there on like a Hyperion build or something like that. Mac nose looks amazing. I would agree. I think it looks really, really nice. Yeah, so Michael who's asking, I actually have already sent an inquiry to our team about that for the actual tempered glass side panel. I'm pretty sure it's just an optical perception factor where, again, because you have a brighter interior, essentially the perception of the tint level is less. But to my knowledge right now, the actual tint for the actual tempered glass side panel is the same between essentially the black Hyperion and the white Hyperion. There's no difference. But I have actually double checked to inquire with our team if we did make a revision or we made an aesthetic adjustment specifically for the white Hyperion. But to my knowledge, it is the same. But I can tell you that that's not something that's surprising, right? Again, if you kind of look on the GT501, the GT502 chassis, you similarly see that it seems like the tempered glass is not as dark on the white model than it is on the black model. Okay. Mac notes is, I just picked up the GT502 and the ASUS Tough Gaming 4090. I'm in the process of getting everything together to build. Fantastic, man. That's going to be an awesome build. Yeah, I mean, the GT502 is really, really easy to build in. I love that chassis. The handles are nice. You got tons of room to be able to do everything. You don't have to worry about cable management because it's a split chamber design. It's going to have way enough room for a 4090, so you're going to be good to go. So I'm really excited about doing that. Once you get it all built, man, make sure to go ahead and share it in our PCDIY group, and maybe you can have it featured here in the PCDIY Builders Spotlight. Johnny also notes the white setup looks cool. Yeah, I would agree as well. All right. Let me just see here. If there were a white ATX Prime case, I'd load it up with all the Prime parts and I'd call it the Prime Direct. That gets a thumbs up for me. That's a pretty good one. I like that. Oh man, I like that. That's pretty sweet. That's pretty sweet. Yeah. I do have some plans, some other plans for ATX chassis, as well as even for other Prime offerings. Even things with like the AP201, we actually had it like a mini ITX variant. So there are other kind of chassis that we have in the pipeline. But right now, I think the next chassis that we're immediately probably going to be looking to release is we have the white Hyperion. Then we next up we have our ProArt chassis, which I don't know if the ProArt chassis will be out by the end of this year, but there's the ProArt chassis. And then we actually have one that I'm really excited about, which is the Tough Gaming GT302. That is going to be, I think, a very, very strong value-oriented chassis. Our price point we're projecting is probably somewhere around the $100-ish price point. It's built really well. It's got a really nice, open, clean layout to it. Might come in some interesting colorways. I'm really excited about that. Might be maybe the sleeper hit, I think, within the lineup, although all the chassis really, I think, have done a great job to kind of complement different types of aesthetics, as well as kind of different types of builds and different types of users. So make sure to keep it tuned if you're interested in that. All right, let me go in answer one more question here before we get into our next part. I'm ordering an ROG Strix. Which RAM would you recommend? I have a 13700K. That's a good question. So I talk a little bit about this in my DDR5 Insights post, which is actually in the PCDIY group. So when you're taking a look at the memory, really what you have to ask yourself, right, is what's the density you're going to focus on? So if you're focusing really on kind of gaming, there really isn't any need to go more than 32 gigabytes, which also is going to allow you to have higher frequency. So when we talk about the overall frequency, let's go ahead and actually just bring up these little numbers right here. And I know for some of you that watch the stream, you've already seen this. So hopefully you won't have it be too repetitious, but since this is a Q&A stream, I just want to spend a little time to re-highlight on this again. So let's take a look at the actual specifications for the CPU. So if we actually take a look over here, we can actually see that the max official speed right here is 5600 MT. That means any speed that's over that is technically an overclock. It's not even guaranteed. The percentage of likelihood is quite good. So for 12th gen, the speed was actually much lower, it was 4800, but about 80% of CPUs would generally be able to hit about 6000 MT plus. For 13th gen, of course, this number has gone up now to 5600 MT, and instead of having that 6000 be the relative kind of benchmark for overclocking, it's actually closer to about 7000 MT for, I'd say, about 75 to almost 80% of CPUs. So that means that you can really kind of pick any memory kit that you want, and you're going to have a pretty high level of success in terms of being able to drop it in and have it run without any issues. The only thing that I would recommend is when you're selecting the memory, Corsair, they are a great memory partner, but they don't allow for native RGB lighting control. So if you want a more seamless experience, any other memory partner does allow for native API control for the RGB lighting on their memory. So that would be, Kingston. Excuse me, that would be Kingston, it could be Patriot, G-Skill, Team Group, right? Any one of those partners, pretty much everybody else, all allows for native RGB lighting control. So that means you don't have to have a third-party software plugin or anything like that. You can just drop it in and you're good to go. I think from the relative kind of sweet spot in terms of performance, memory speed has dropped a lot. So if you are trying to prioritize a little bit of a higher-end build, it sounds like a 13700, that's definitely still an enthusiast system. I'd probably look at maybe something 6400, maybe like a C32 kit or something like that. If you start to go to the tighter stuff like C30, it's going to get a little bit more expensive. 7000 though is not really that expensive if you got a little bit budget and you are driving maybe more aggressive kind of refresh rates and resolution, then you do get a little bit more bandwidth, you get a little bit more performance. It's not massive, but the difference between like 6000 to 7000, you can actually measure it. It is a notable improvement, so it might be something to consider. But you know, for a lot of people, you know, 6,000 kit like C32 is going to be very, very good, and it's very price accessible, right? So that would be my recommendation when it comes to RAM. And if you have more questions on the memory side, definitely make sure to check out our DDR5 Insights post. I also have a DDR5 Insights like live stream where I talk about like the things you want to keep in mind in terms of overclocking memory, certain performance tuning parameters, and how to test your memory scaling, and a lot of things like that. So if you have more questions, also make sure to just drop them in the PCDIY group. We'd love to have that information there. All right, so let me go ahead and now give you guys a little bit of a teaser update here on a new product that we've got, and I will continue on to the Q&A, so no worries on that side. So give me 1 second, but I want to go ahead and touch on this guy. So we are going to have an ROG Swift monitor update. This is going to be the ROG Swift PG27UQR, but in white. So we currently already have this monitor. It's already out right now. Pretty much just the non-white variant. So $699. It's a great choice. I'm a big fan. I know some people prefer 4K at 32 inches. I really like the pixel density at 27 inches for 4K. It's super sharp. So somebody, if you really love text, like of course I'm spending a lot of time reading comments, on Reddit, the PCDIY group, social feeds, documents, websites, all that type of stuff. I love really sharp, clean text. So I really love the way that 4K renders actually on a 27-inch display. But the rest of the display is a really nice balancing right here. It's fast IPS, 160 hertz, 1 millisecond gray to gray. That's of course your peak, because of course keep that if you measure the totality of the panel, the actual overall average response time will be higher than that. NVIDIA G-Sync compatibility support, variable overdrive, which is important because of course you want to be able to maintain a high level of motion clarity across your refresh rate range. So whether you're kind of gaming at that 160 or 140 or 120 or 90 or 75, the variable overdrive helps to essentially balance out and mitigate things like overshoot or undershoot, so that you get good motion clarity experience across the range. Display HDR 600, while that's not a 1000 base rating, that means that it's going to be a very bold and bright and dynamic display. Even if you run this under SDR, it's going to be significantly brighter than probably your traditional SDR monitors. For probably most of you, your SDR monitors are generally going to be somewhere around 200, 250 nits. SDR performance will be very bright, very punchy, and this is a very dynamic panel in terms of its color accuracy and color reproduction as well. Some other cool things too is it does have HDMI 2.1, so great if you want to be able to align that with, of course, the latest generation of graphics cards, or of course maybe you want to have cross compatibility with a console. Although keep in mind, you don't actually have to have HDMI 2.1 to have VRR support with the latest generation consoles. They can work without HDMI 2.1. Sometimes it's a myth that's been kind of thrown out there that you have to have 2.1 to actually have VRR support. But it's nice in terms of just having that specification right there. You can see that really nice clean design, 5-way joystick navigation. This also does have our wide range of ergonomic based adjustment options here. So if we scroll all the way down, let me keep scrolling. Actually right there you can see the DCPI coverage, 95% DCPI, quite nice. But if we go over here, you can see that your connectivity is quite nice. So you got USB 3.2, Gen 1, Type A port, HDMI 2.1, 2.1, and then 2 display ports with DSC. So great. So that means you essentially have full refresh and resolution support across pretty much all 4 of your connectors, and then a 3.5 millimeter jack there for your headphone. And ergonomics, it sometimes gets overlooked, but I think it's really important. I love having a lot of flexibility in my display, so you can do height adjustment, tilt, swivel, or pivot. And I believe this monitor also will support the ROG desk mount kit. I don't know if Connor Johnson is joining us this week, but he joined us last week. And if you're not aware what that guy is there's a cool little accessory that we have for a select range of our ROG Swift monitors. Not any of our new OLED monitors, but our LCD monitors. But it's a cool accessory that you can essentially remove the base. You can attach this. You're going to lose a little bit of that white, but it's minimal. It's kind of a silver gray, so I still think it works in terms of the design aesthetic. But it's really nice in terms of just giving you a huge amount of space on your desk setup. So if you don't want to use like a VESA mount arm and stuff like that, just mount that on there. You're good to go. So that one will be coming in the not too distant future, if you're interested in having a bold, bright, fast, and dynamic 4K monitor. So check that out. I can go ahead and drop the link in the chat there. So give me 1 second right here. I'll drop that link in the chat there for that one. All right, let me go ahead and go to a next question before we get into one other update that I got for another product. So one more question, 6400 MT DDR5 them perfect. I'm not exactly sure what you mean by that, but it's a very solid choice. 6400 kits also tend to usually have a little bit higher grade ICs, so they're probably some form of the SK Hynix. They also generally have some scaling room in them, so if you even wanted to play around a little bit with manual overclocking, you can probably scale that out to like 66, 6800, maybe even 7000 MT. So it's a nice balance option, considering if you want to kind of bump up from maybe like a more basic 6000 base kit. Okay. Chris asks a question. He goes, can I ask, GPU horizontal or vertical? Is it the same performance? In an ideal situation, yes, that should generally be parity performance. There can be some scenarios where potentially I'd say vertical can actually perform worse. It just kind of depends, you know. So when you mount the GPU, if let's say the GPU is maybe too close to like your tempered glass side panel and maybe you're reducing a little bit of airflow, technically that can maybe mean that the GPU temperature is a little bit hotter, so that when the boost clocks are kind of going up a little bit more, they might actually boost a little bit less because the temps are a little bit lower, excuse me, a little bit higher, because it's important to remember that your temperature aligns with your GPU boost clock, right? So generally the lower the temperature, the higher the boost clock can go, and generally the more sustained that it can be at that higher level. But overall, if all things are designed well, so the chassis kind of can comfortably accommodate a vertical card or a horizontal card, then the overall relative performance should generally be parity. You shouldn't notice an experience. One thing though that I like to note though, that some users forget about when you talk about the accessibility on a motherboard. So if you go, let's say with a mount, so let's actually just take a look at, you know, a board for instance here. If you were to vertically mount, one disadvantage that you have to keep in mind that sometimes users forget about is you're going to block a lot of slots. So take for instance, like here, you might buy this nice new motherboard because it has 4 M.2 slots on there. Now, if you vertically mount it, you're going to block literally this M.2 slot, this M.2 slot, you know, and maybe even a third slot, right? You might not have any access to it. Those SATA is going to be much more difficult to get a power to, and even things like these front connectors or supplemental fan connectors, right? So you almost have to kind of make sure that you connect everything else. So that is kind of like a little bit of a challenge point that you have to account for, that just, it makes maintenance or upgrades a little bit more problematic. Then you also do have to account for the quality of the riser cable. In our testing and evaluation, we've actually found numerous riser cables that have issues with what's called EMI, electromagnetic interference, which can produce instability, crashes, black screens, all kinds of different problems. Sometimes the cable has to be dropped into operating with a lower PCIe mode to work correctly. And sometimes actually environmentally, even if the cable's well designed, it can still actually be susceptible to issues. So there's just, I'd say, more potential aspects that you have to consider. But all things considered, if everything works well, you can still have a great, stable, reliable experience. So you can 100% have a very good experience with a vertical mount. I just think that it's ultimately easier and more straightforward. I also like the look a little bit more. I feel it's a little bit more balanced, but there are some amazing builders, you know, Justin here, Liquid House, who is also in the group, right? And even many members in our own community that have done beautiful builds with a vertical mount, where I think as long as you think about the totality of the look and feel of the build, it can still look really, really nice. Okay. Michael goes, can I get my hands on an Omni figure by ASUS? Right now, no. We don't have any plans to have, I think, a mass production Omni figure, but whether or not we might do something community giveaway or something like that, who knows? Make sure to keep it tuned. If we do, you'll find out. Sabishito goes, might as well go with 224 7200 kits, easier to hit 8,000 plus on those. So the big thing that you're going to have to keep in count there is that 8,000 is going to generally be more realistically only achievable on a 2-DIMM motherboard, so something like an Apex or a mini ITX board, not generally a 4-DIMM board. I have been able to do like 7800 on 4-DIMM boards. So you can still get very high frequency, but the signal reflection is higher on a 4-DIMM board than on a 2-DIMM board. You also have to account for that IMC variance. So if you remember when I said that the majority of CPUs can hit 7000 MT, a lot of users anecdotally bring their reference knowledge to the conversation on overclocking. And there's nothing wrong with that, but it's anecdotal because it's maybe limited to one sample. When we are generally trying to provide feedback, it's actually because we've tested hundreds of samples. So we have a much better kind of sense of what the actual relative margin is. And I can tell you that there are actually tons of CPUs that outright, it doesn't matter. You can have a board that you pre-checked, and with another CPU hits 8,000, you drop another CPU in there and it's not going to post, it won't stabilize. And you even get weird areas where sometimes users goes, but it posts, so therefore it should be stable. Nope, just because it posts doesn't mean that it's going to be stable. So you want to try to target something that is realistic in terms of, I think, success rate. I think, you know, anything when you start to break to the 76, 78, 8,000 plus category, you really want to be an enthusiast to kind of know a little bit more in terms of the things you might have to tune or tailor to be able to stabilize that. And also, I think critically kind of understand just the processes that goes into kind of testing memory stability and other factors like that. So my recommendation, I think that would be a little bit higher, but I think 72 is not a bad choice. 72 is actually still pretty reasonable from a cost perspective. And even if your IMC was on the weaker side, you could easily drop to 7,000 and then tighten up your timings to probably have your 7,000 still operate at those tighter timings, then better than the maybe slightly higher timings that you have to run the 7200 at, right? All right, so that takes care of us there in terms of that update. All right, so one other little cool update that I've got for you guys here is going to be actually the availability of a product. So let me go ahead and bring it up right here. Give me 1 second, and I will bring it up. But I believe I announced this previously, so I just want to let you guys know that it is available right now. And that is going to be the ROG Strix 1000 watt gold Aura edition. So if you guys are not aware, the Aura edition PSUs, those are essentially our latest update to our lineup. So we already had, of course, the Tough Gaming Gold series, which are ATX 3.0. We then have the SFXL Loki series, which are ATX 3.0. And now we have the ROG Strix Aura series, which are also ATX 3.0, and have that native 12-volt high-power connector in there. So these have already started being listing on the ASUS store. You'll start to see broader channel availability in the not-too-distant future. The 1,000 watt is already there. I think the 850 watt, though, is listed, but it's not actually available. But you'll start to see the other models start to come in. But I think for probably a lot of people in terms of the price to position feature set, the 1000 watt is going to be a very, very popular option right here. So great choice. It is an extremely, I think it's probably the quietest PSU in its class in the entirety of the market. Great design, really, really cool design aesthetic with, I love this kind of honeycomb design here with just a little bit of the silhouette with the RGI and of course the RGB lighting. You can see the actual profiling there in terms of actually not only the efficiency, but if we actually, I think the sound profile is in there. It was in the last chart, or I might have showed it. If you probably check out the stream where I did the introduction to these, I showed up, I think, actually the sound curve that I have there. But I think our target for this is actually like 20 dB. It's effectively silent. It's crazy. It's very, 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 very impressive. Literally, you're going to hear every other part of your system. You're not going to hear the PSU. But a cool addition. So we have it right there, the ROG Strix Aura Gold 1000 watt. Why don't you let me know, what are you guys running in your system right now? What is the wattage that you have relative to your PSU? And then maybe second question, how long have you been running your PSU? PSUs tend to be one of those things that sometimes people make their investment on, and then they can keep it for like, 5, 6, 7 years, maybe 3, 4, 5 builds. They don't swap them out. So pretty cool in that respect. All right, let me go ahead and just see right here. I think Liquid House showing some love right there, saying very, very cool. Like that. Okay. Michael notes he's running a 1200 watt. Yeah, so 1200 is pretty popular, I think, amongst a lot of enthusiasts. It's probably a little bit overkill. The reality is, some of the older GPUs sometimes had a little bit more of an aggressive what's called transient spike, but most PSUs that are good quality already had essentially kind of designed for that headroom spike. So even though it might be like an 850 watt, it has a spike level of accommodation that actually exceeds that 850 watt, right? There's of course the amount of time that it actually can hold that, and there's other kind of factors in that. But 1200 watt, I mean, that pretty much will run just about anything out there, short of some crazy kind of multi GPU or a very specialized kind of high-end HEDT type platform or something along those lines, right? All right, so that covers us there for the ROG Strix Aura Gold, and I believe I dropped that link in the chat there. Okay, very, very cool. Let me go ahead and check that one out, drop that one out. Okay, cool. All right, so we're going to continue on taking a look at some end user Q&A, seeing what else people kind of have, but I'm going to drop lastly for you guys just 3 little promotions that we have going on right now. So if you guys are maybe interested in some cool little promos, I'm going to show you guys 3 of them that we have going on right now. So one is going to be for the 49WCR, so that is going to be a big ultra wide. Yeah, that's right. That's a 49-inch monitor. It's a double QHD 32 by 9. That's 5140 by 1440. It's a curved base display, 165 hertz. Has our ELMB sync technology, which means that you get backlight strobing, but you can also run adaptive sync at the same time. Higher than standard display brightness. Again, it's HDR 400, so it's not designed for HDR gaming, but you still get a bold and bright SDR gaming experience. Very, very nice coverage right there in terms of 90% DCI-3, USB Type-C, and our smart KVM feature. But I also really dig right here, you get the display widget and an RJ45 connection on the display. So you can actually share that with something like a laptop, where a lot of the newer laptops might not even have Ethernet. So that's pretty cool. So this is actually $100 off. Normally it's coming in at $999, but now you can get it for $899. So if you've been looking to maybe step up to maybe that ultra wide or maybe double kind of monitor vibe setup, this is pretty sweet. And this one, I can tell you, is actually compatible also with the ROG desk mount kit. So that's pretty cool. So if you want to even use that C-clamp mount design for this one, you can directly mount it to your desk, and you can have that really nice dynamic big bold display, and you're going to be good to go. So that is going to be the XG49WCR. And if you don't know about Display Widget, all Display Widget is that software that you can run inside Windows to control the on-screen display. I'm a really big fan of that functionality because it means I don't physically have to touch a button on the monitor. So if I wanted to change like my brightness or contrast, or maybe I want to have different profiles between like FPS to sRGB to like racing, I can do all of that inside of the Display Widget Center. It's a really, really nice, useful experience when it comes to just accessing the OSD for the monitor. Let me quickly check on one thing on this one. If it does have, I don't remember if this one has a display widget. A threaded mount. Let me see if it has the threaded mount connector here. And I believe this is, yeah, it is 10-bit, which is pretty cool. Let's see here. Picture in picture and picture by picture technology. I didn't know that. That's pretty cool. Speakers are actually nicer than standard. These are 5 watt. A lot of times the speakers on monitors are going to be like 1 watt, maybe 2 watts. 5 watts is a little bit more punchy. It's kind of nice that maybe if you're just watching something like a stream, maybe just listen to a little bit of music in the background, or maybe just watching like a YouTube video, it's nice. And maybe you don't want to have to put on headphones, or maybe you don't have like discrete dedicated monitors or speakers or something like that, right? Yes, it does actually have the tripod mount, so it has the threaded mount connector. So that means on the top of the monitor, you do have the ability that you can mount something like a camera, like a light, a secondary monitor. You can have different accessories that you can easily mount there. And you do have tilt, swivel, and height adjustment. They're all available to you there. All right, that is going to be the XG49WCR. Drop that one in the chat there, so let me go ahead and put that in there for you guys. Let's see, Slick Notes 4K OLED 240 hertz. Yeah, so that's a monitor that we previously announced that'll be coming out later on. But you know, of course, that's a whole nother ballgame, right? OLED, you know, you have to account for some usability factors in terms of kind of the long-term reliability in terms of text and burn-in. You also have to account for 240 hertz, where if you're also gaming there, it could also require even a higher level of rendering performance on your GPU side. So there's a lot of kind of multiple factors, but that's the reason why we make lots of monitors, right? Lots of monitors give you lots of choice, lots of flexibility to align with your budget, your wants, your needs, your setup, whatever it might be. Hey, Robert, man, happy to have you here on the stream. Thanks so much for showing. If no full AD and 1000 nit brightness, there's no point. Actually, I would 100% disagree with that. The reality is that the vast majority of people still actually game and use their desktop in an SDR environment, not in an HDR environment, right? So 1000 nits and full array local dimming can definitely be beneficial if your focus is first and foremost HDR. So if you really want an HDR centric experience, then yes, you want to target a full array local dimming type of display, whether it's going to be with mini LED tech, or, you know, later on micro LED, or of course OLED, which is a self-emissive technology. But in terms of saying that you have no inherent value from higher brightness levels, that's inaccurate, because inherently we tend to usually like brighter types of displays. You can also benefit from having a little bit of a brighter display in ambient light handling. So if, let's say, you have a little bit of kind of sun coming in, having it be able to have a brighter display is just going to allow you to have better readability. It's very similar to like when you take your phone out of your pocket and you might be outdoors, having a higher level of brightness on the display allows you to more easily read or see that type of display. So there's a lot of different ways that you kind of have to interpret what the spec is going to provide you and when it's going to provide you a benefit. And I would definitely say for HDR gaming, yes, I would agree. You know, look at any number of one of the kind of the 1000 nit monitors or one of the OLED monitors if you're really focusing on HDR gaming. But if you're like the majority gamers, which are only focusing on SDR gaming, then you can still get value there. Especially like I noted, where a lot of people that are making an upgrade, they might be only upgrading from, let's say, you know, like a 200 nit monitor. If you upgrade to a monitor that's HDR 600, even if you don't game in HDR, the SDR brightness could maybe be still, you know, 40% or 50% higher, which would be notable to you. You would generally, it would look more vibrant, more punchy, more dynamic. Okay. Bass notes, I've got an 850 watt for my 7th gen and 1200 watt for my 12th gen. Ooh, rocking 2 different systems. Yeah, that makes sense. Pretty good, pretty good. All right, and Tech notes that they're rocking a 1000 watt base power supply. Okay, pretty cool. All right, let's go ahead and go to our next little bit of a promo item that we've got right here. This one is going to be 30 bucks off for a nice option right here if you're looking to maybe build on the AM5 platform. So this is going to be the B650E. Remember, E means that you essentially have those 2 chipsets, so you even have more PCI Express lanes. Dash F is going to be positioned underneath our Dash E. The Dash E is usually the highest end model that we have in the ROG Strix lineup. I think this is a great balance of giving you tons of really great features, functions, and spec without going into like a super high-end board. That nice little savings, bringing it down from $290 to $260, so $30 savings, I think is a great choice right here. You're going to get pretty much all of kind of our latest and greatest kind of features and functions and design benefits that we got here. So it's going to have a really nice, just clean monochromatic design ID. You get things like the Q release. You get one M.2, two M.2, then another M.2 right here. You get 3 RGB headers. You get, of course, PCI Express Gen 5 for both M.2 and for the graphics are going to be in there. Great overclocking support, Wi-Fi 6E, robust VRM design. Lots of connectivity here on the terms of the rear I.O. where you can see 4, then you can see 8, and then you can see 10, right? And then 11, 12. So 12 ports on the back of this board. So lots of I.O. I'm a big fan of this model. I think it's a great balancing act that if you're looking without necessarily kind of going to a much higher end board, still gives you a lot of flexibility in terms of storage, expansive performance, and feature set. So great choice there. Somebody asking, what's the main thing if I jump up to a higher end board? You might add in things that take, for instance, like on the Crosshair model, where here you're going to have you can see like 10 gigabit connections and 5 gigabit connections as you can jump over to, let's say, like the Crosshair Hero, and the Crosshair will actually have 40 gigabit connections, right? And it will also not even have any USB 2. It'll all be high speed. So that's like an example of maybe having a difference, or having things like where it'll even support more M.2 SSDs, or the M.2, right, where all of these have heat sinks. The Crosshair will actually have what's called a dual contact heatsink design, which means that it actually has a heatsink on the bottom and on the top. So being able to provide even lower temperatures to that. So there's a lot of differences. And again, if you guys want to find out about those, either you can ask about them because we're doing the Q&A stream, or you can check out our overview videos that we did, I think, on pretty much all of the AM5 motherboards on our lineup. And you can find those right now on our YouTube channel. But I think a nice promo that we've got going on right there for the ROG Strix B650E-F. So let me go ahead and drop that one in the chat. And I'll check in a moment here right now for questions, so give me one sec. And this is my last promo I've got. So this is going to be a Z690 based motherboard, but of course with Z690 you still have full compatibility actually for 12th gen, for 13th gen, and for Intel next gen series CPUs with the UEFI BIOS update. Still nice option. It's been dropped down all the way to 180 bucks. You still get DDR5 support. Actually, it does very solid in terms of even DDR5 overclocking. You can run DDR5 7000 MT on this board. So even if you wanted to go with a little bit more expensive kit, although probably from a price perspective, if you're buying this tough gaming board, you probably have a more limited budget, so you're probably paying something like 6000 MT, but it's nice to know that you have that there. You got 4 M.2 slots, Wi-Fi 6E, 2.5 gigabit LAN on this model, so a really nice foundation in terms of kind of your core functions and features and spec. That's kind of interesting why it says X570. I'll have to talk to our team there. A little bit of a snafu. You know, nice solid I/O where you got 2 Type-C ports. All of this is all high speed in terms of all the rear I/O as well, right? Nice, big, robust VRM heatsinks as well. About the only thing that I think this model I wish that it had for some users that I know that they ask about, and it is not on this model, would be something like our ASUS AIOC technology, which actually we are introducing for the first time on the refreshed version of the Tough Gaming Z790 model, the Tough Gaming Z790 Pro, which is a follow-up to the current Tough Gaming Z790 Plus, right? But I think $40 off for this model, I definitely would have no qualms about building a system utilizing a 12th gen, 13th gen, or like I said, having a foundation even for a next gen series CPU, because again, the VRM, the heatsink, the foundation that you've got here is very, very solid for building a system. All right, so that, I'm going to drop that one in the chat there too. So give me 1 second here, and then we're going to go back into questions. So give me 1 second here. Just drop that in there. Bam. All right. That wraps it up for sales and promos. Let's see here. Any questions that might have been popped up there? Asking, is there a C and D? No. In terms of our ROG Strix lineup, generally we have E. So that's our highest end model, and then it goes below that. So we have usually E, we have F, we will have sometimes G. G will be a micro ATX, and then we'll have H, and then we'll have A. A is always going to be our white variant. So an example here, if I show you the refresh for the Z790-A, which I think I showed a little bit earlier, right? I showed this motherboard. This is the Dash A. But in terms of the lineup, right, Dash A is generally the starting point, right? Sometimes we have like a Dash H, which is kind of similar, although we tend to have the Dash H maybe more limited to sometimes certain brick and mortar e-tailers, so something like a Micro Center. But then you have the F, and then you have the E, okay? And then, of course, you have I, but I is fairly self-explanatory, hopefully, in terms of that's mini ITX, okay? Kevin Daly notes says, I still have my first gen Thor 1200 watt going strong in my Helios. Yeah, I mean, I still have that in one of my primary systems as well. That Thor 1200 watts, a fantastic PSU. And of course, just with some adapter cables, bam, you can fully even support that with, of course, the most modern generation GPUs. So it's cool, it's quiet, it's performant, built well. And hey, it also came still with a cable mod coupon code in there. So you can go ahead and upgrade to nicer cables, even if you want to be able to do that. Although even that model, the first gen Thor, does still come with a nice set of individually received cables in there as well. Robert is asking, I want to trade my Maximus Z790 Extreme for an ASUS Z790 Dark Hero. Make it happen. Interesting. Why would you want to trade? I mean, the Dark Hero is great. I mean, it looks really cool. It has a couple of nice things, but the Extreme is the Extreme. I mean, you got everything from the DIMM.2 to the Enemy Matrix to the 10G to the voltmeter on there, the dual BIOS design on there. So I mean, why would you make that trade? I'd be interested to know, why would you make that trade, right? Interesting. So Slick asks a question: will a fan on the back of the monitor help with burn-in? So that's partly actually kind of why we already do our advanced, what we call our ROG thermal design. So the ROG thermal design is present to be able to help to keep generally the OLED panel operating usually below a target temperature. There's variability between different types of panels in terms of kind of what you want that target temperature to be. In the past, for let's say an example was like 60C, we wanted to keep it underneath that. That helps to mitigate the likelihood of, let's say, burn-in occurring. Now there's going to be variability in terms of like on-screen content and rendering and like your brightness and how that influences factors. That's also why we have things like intelligent voltage optimization, which is an alignment to handle how that's happening. But what you don't ever know is going to be actually your ambient environment, right? Your ambient temperature, whether you might have indirect sunlight for maybe like light coming through a window and then being amplified and hitting a panel. So there's a lot of kind of conditional factors. As a whole, though, I would say yes. If you can keep generally the monitor cooler, it's not going to be a negative. It will generally be a positive. But one of the benefits of buying the ROG Swift OLED models is that we have already put in design work with some form of like a specialized heatsink design or other types of designs like the graphene film, which we're using on the new OLED monitors as well, to be able to go ahead and mitigate against burn-in by helping to manage temperatures. And that also inversely helps us to have generally higher brightness performance compared to competitors. Like the current ROG Swift 27-inch OLED is significantly brighter than every other monitor that's on the market. So Corsair's monitor, it's nowhere near as bright. Acer's monitor is nowhere near as bright. LG's monitors is nowhere near as bright. We are definitely the best in class experience, whether it's SDR brightness or HDR brightness. Our 27-inch OLED really sets the benchmark in that experience. Okay, very, very cool. Let me go ahead and just see right there. Mike notes says, oh, that Strix and the Prime look awesome for my next white build. Yeah, well, that's why we make them. The Prime series and the ROG Strix-A models, as well as select models when we have them under the ROG lineup on white side, I think are great choices right there. Shabito says the Extreme and the Apex, yes, they are EOL based boards. So the Apex is right now out of production, and then the Extreme is also out of production. But as I noted, we do have some announcements coming later to complete our Z790 refresh. So make sure to keep it new, keep it tuned in that respect right there. Robert goes, yeah, I know. I just love my Dark Hero. I really would also love Wi-Fi 7. I can get that. Hey, totally. I mean, that's one of the cool things about there. That for sure on the Hero, the Dark Hero compared to the Extreme, you're moving from Wi-Fi 6E to Wi-Fi 7. Yeah, interesting. This is a really interesting point. As I wish there was a Maximus Extreme in the ATX form factor. I sacrificed 2 RAM slots for DIMM.2. It's actually something I talked to about our team. We had a kind of a discussion about maybe on future motherboards. And what's your thoughts? One of the thoughts that we discussed was actually for future Crosshair and Maximus series was making a change and maybe having all of them be 2 DIMM motherboards as opposed to 4 DIMM based motherboards. The benefit, of course, is generally higher DRAM overclocking scaling. Better overall interoperability and compatibility in the experience for users, because you kind of can't potentially put in 4 DIMMs and have the problems that you may or may not be aware of when it comes to DRAM scaling and the port table and kind of so many other factors. And of course, less signal reflection means you also have higher viability to be able to heat higher speeds. And just like the Apex, right? The Apex is an ATX based board and only 2 DIMMs, but it also gave you that DIMM.2. So that means that you then have that really nice accessibility that if you want to be able to really easily put in 2 DIMM slot, 2 M.2 SSDs and not even have to do anything at the bottom of the motherboard with any type of heatsink, especially if you're doing water cooling or you just want a more streamlined or accessible experience, you don't have to move out the graphics card. It was pretty cool. That's not ultimately what happened, but it is something that we've discussed. So it's nice to hear your feedback in terms of you appreciating what we've done with the DIMM.2 design and wanting to see that on maybe more ATX-based motherboards. So that is pretty cool. Michael knows, will ASUS have future BIOS self-testing diagnostics that run automatically prior to a boot? We actually have tested some things like that internally, having like a bootable diagnostic utility. To some degree, that's also part of the reason why we implemented the memtest function. So now for a couple of years, actually for a few years now, we've already had memtest on like ROG motherboards, right? So that means that when you go ahead and you power on your system and it posts, you can immediately go into the UEFI and you can run a memory test so that you can actually verify the stability of your CPU and your memory, right? So that helps to just streamline the experience. The challenge that you have is that stability testing, right? When you talk about like a self-diagnostic boot, what are you really attempting to diagnose? So right now the board already goes through generally a power on self-test. That's different than, let's say, like a stability test. And if you do stability testing, it can actually be quite complicated because a lot of components, they operate differently in a non-OS environment as they do in an OS environment. So things like certain power states, clock frequency boosting behavior, or a lot of those things you ideally want to do under an operating system model. One thing we've evaluated is maybe having like a special like ROG bootable OS. So maybe you like boot into this. So like you might have like a future motherboard and on that flash drive, because like all of our new Maximus or Crosshair boards, they come with a flash drive, right? So maybe it has like a little bootable OS volume on there. And in that distribution, you can boot into it and you could test your CPU, you could test your Ethernet, you could test your audio, you could test your memory, right? Because we also do have fundamental limitations of the of the ROM. So the ROM is the chip that's down there on the motherboard for the BIOS, in terms of the size that you have. So if you want to be able to put more and more and more stuff into it, it can be quite challenging because you have a space constraint, especially if you need to be able to have space for future updates, whether they're security or CPU, interoperability and compatibility patches and things like that. That's actually the reason why on AMD, we don't actually have memory testing built in versus on Intel we do. And there's also some differences in terms of the UEFI code, and kind of how it's designed. But that is something that we're looking at. Right now, we don't have any plans necessarily to do that, but we are attempting to supplement that maybe through more enhancements of streamlined kind of automation or testing with things like ASUS AOC, and give you like a predictory information on where performance tuning can be and kind of aligning with how you might stress test your system. So some things like that. Shibita goes, Extreme and ATX with less 2 slots is basically an Apex. Actually, I would say it's not basically an Apex, because take, for instance, like the Apex, it doesn't have Thunderbolt, right? So the IO is usually going to be more reserved, right? The audio design is also different. The Apex doesn't have the ESS Saber DAC, right? I would say from a performance tuning perspective, they're very similar, because of course they're both designed as kind of being like an enthusiast-centric OC type of board. But usually for the spec IO, it's actually quite different. Even things like the dual contact heatsink designs, those aren't on the Apex in the same way that they actually are on the Extreme, right? So there's actually quite a number of variable differences between them. Even like the fan header designs, where on like the Apex has like full speed fan headers, where like on the Extreme you have more traditional fan headers. So there's a lot of variability. I think the better model to kind of compare would be is that ideally, I think for a lot of people, they might be excited at being able to get something like the Formula, or even if we reintroduce the Code or the Extreme with that type of design. But I know there's a lot of people that just like the way 4DIMMs look. So we have concern also that if we went with that approach, there would be people that wouldn't be happy, because they would just have a presumption that they're getting less, even though we think that we're giving them more with something like the better DRAM scaling and the DIMM.2 based design, right? Michael goes, I would love DIMM.2 with Gen 5 support. Yeah, we did that already. We did it on AMD, not on Intel, because of course there's just differences in terms of the chipset and overall designs. But that's why the DIMM.2 card went to being designed as called the Gen Z add-in card. That card is actually supports PCI Express Gen 5. So we have already kind of designed the new version, which is designed for PCI Express Gen 5. MH Racing goes is, hi, can I use an 850 watt power supply on your ASUS Z790E gaming motherboard using a 13700K? Yeah, that's actually a great combination. In terms of like the power envelope, I would probably say for 13700K, I mean, you haven't noted your GPU, which is going to be a factor right there, but probably nominally you're going to be somewhere at around maybe 450 watts of power utilization, maybe about 500 watts. Your power settings make a big difference. So there's something that's actually called multi-core enhancement. If you disable this to enable this, you can have a pretty big difference in terms of your power level that your CPU would utilize. But it very much also depends on what you're running on your system. Some people want to measure power under like a peak condition, so like by running like Cinebench or like Blender or something like that, or Prime 95. And that's not really realistic. If you're actually only gaming, your power envelope will be significantly lower than that, right? But yeah, I have no problem. Actually, the demo system I've done many test streams on, I've actually, with both 12900Ks and 13900Ks, I've used 750 watt and 850 watts with 3070s, 4070s. Actually, I think one even had a 4080 base card in there. So it's okay. You don't have to necessarily feel like you have to go there. The more important part is, of course, just making sure that it's a quality 850 watt and that, it meets good amperage output requirements and things along those lines. Okay. Hey, Mr. Ian, is that right? I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly. I just joined. I'm not sure if anybody asked this question, but are we going to have a new Extreme motherboard or any option that's similar? All I can tell you is that we do have some additional items that are going to be coming up for the Z790 refresh, but I can confirm, and it was asked, right now we don't have a replacement for the Maximus Z790 Extreme. So we do have some other boards. We've already gone ahead and make announcements, of course, with 3 models, right, where we have the ROG Strix Z790-A Gaming Wi-Fi 2, the ROG Strix, then we have the ROG Maximus Z790 Dark Hero, and then we also did the Tough Gaming Z790 Pro. So 3 models in that respect, but there's no replacement for the Extreme, or no update, right? No refresh. Kevin Daly notes is that onboard memtest has been very helpful in detecting some errors in my RAM configuration, and also I think just really convenient, right? Like you don't have to download a bootable utility, create like a flash drive or anything like that. It's like it's so easy that you can just boot into the UEFI, click a button, and then boot it up, and you're straight into memory testing. It just makes it so much easier. Really, really easy. Mosley goes, any info on EVA 2 availability? Yes, so I talked a little bit about this, I think, on the last stream. We'll have information in the not too distant future. We expect to probably have the first wave release starting next month, which is what we've already communicated. So there will be actually 4 releases for the ROG Evangelion Wave 2. I think probably everybody is pretty much aware of these guys, right? The ROG Evangelion 2. And we do already have our US website is already up for that. So I will link that in the chat. This will actually be consistently updated. So as the actual products become available, you'll have the link information that will be there. But we'll definitely cover that in the PCDIY group and in the weekly stream in terms of actually all the core components. But you can see right here, right, the chassis, the motherboard, the graphics card, the cooler, the keyboard, the mouse, the Herculex, which is the GPU support, the mouse grips, and then from there, the keycaps, the scabbard, which is, of course, the desk mat, and the power supply. And like I said, we'll have 4 waves of releases starting off in September, and then probably rolling all the way until about maybe mid to late October. So as far as those specific timelines, just make sure to keep it tuned. But 4 releases in terms of the ROG Evangelion Wave 2 release. So Wave 1, Wave 2, Wave 3, Wave 4. There'll be a different set of components for each one of those waves as we get all the way to the end of October. Okay? Johnny goes, I miss the Maximus Z790 formula. Well, we didn't make a Z790 formula, right? We did the formula only up to Z690. But like I said, just make sure to keep it tuned. You may be interested to see what's coming out. All right. Paskowitz also says, yep, I love how it's integrated into the BIOS, right? Michael goes, why is the EVA O2 monitor not available in the US? Just wondering, as you said no last time. Yeah, it just came down to kind of inventory and kind of just some logistic factors, right? We actually still might have some inventory of the Evangelion 1. I know color ID wise, it's of course not exactly the same, but because maybe most of the design isn't as apparent, right? Because the ID is going to be most clearly apparent on the rear, right? And that's kind of like a balancing act where it's a really beautiful design, but the monitor, right, when you're seeing it, you see the display, right? So that's where kind of the difference is. But yes, for North America, we don't plan to bring in the monitor. So all the components that you see listed there is what will be available in the North American region. Now, if you decide that you want to maybe look at a third-party site that might be importing it or something like that, you can consider that. But as always, we generally do not recommend importing in that respect, because of course warranties are generally regionally defined, and also you know, importing is probably happening through like a third party, and they may not be following essentially our MSRP guidance, right? So the pricing could also be quite different. So it's just something to be mindful of in that respect. Okay. All right. Robert goes, it would be really cool to be able to see a Formula Z790 with Wi-Fi 7. Well, like I said, you're just going to have to keep it tuned. All right, guys. So go ahead and feel free to keep dropping in your questions there. I think I have one other thing here. Let me see if it's in there. Yes. So I just wanted to, now you guys, I already had a full video that I did over with Stuart Tonks at LTX, where you guys can check out actually a full build top to bottom of the actual the ROG Evangelion Wave 2 release, which is really cool because we went over all the kind of components and we put it all together. It's pretty sweet. Actually, I can go ahead and link it here into the chat, but I got some of the updated images of the Hyperion, and so I just thought, hey, let me go ahead and show that to you guys here really quick. So, but let me go ahead and bring this one up just for you guys if you guys want to check it out. And show you that, guys. So let me see here. Where do we have it? I think it should be here. Yeah, here it is. All right. So yeah, if you guys actually want to see kind of like the whole thing come together, we actually did the full live stream build where you can actually see how it all came through as far as like all the components. We also did some general Q&A, but you can kind of see it all come together here towards the end. Let's put it in. I think we were missing a box, so actually there were some cool little XE accessories and some other little stuff that we didn't even show on here, but you can actually see it all come through, and it looks really cool. And again, I absolutely just love kind of how it all just kind of comes together thematically. I think that the Hyperion was like the perfect chassis for this, just because that X frame I think feels inherently kind of anime, it kind of has that mecha vibes to it, right? Really, really cool. But if you guys want to kind of see that full little kind of guided walkthrough, you can check that out. So I will link that in the chat. But let me go ahead and also drop here just these images. Now we already showed off the white Hyperion, so I guess maybe it's like this is like somewhat the Hyperion stream right here, but we can see the chassis in full effect right there. Really, really love that X-frame design. All those slats in there for, of course, all that airflow. Of course, you got tons of I/O connectivity right there with 4 Type A ports and then 2 Type C ports that are going to be on there. Keep in mind that if your motherboard doesn't support all of that, you're not going to be able to connect all of that, but that's entirely normal, right? Love, of course, that pattern finish right there that just carries through in so many different areas of the Hyperion, right? And then from there, even that inside, right? That is normally a removable light panel, which has the ROG accents. The cool thing is for this one, it's still removable. So if you even still decide to do like water cooling, or you decided to do like fans, you can take that out and you can connect it via USB. So you could still put that on your desk. So this, when it illuminates, you can have that external if you wanted to. But of course, if you're not using that space for cooling or for fans, then you can leave it in there and it'll be part, of course, the internal display for the Hyperion. And again, we'll have the giveaway coming up shortly for actually the opportunity to win a Hyperion. Not this one, not the Evangelion version, right? Or the white version, but we are going to be giving away Hyperion to celebrate our 100th PCDIY live stream that we did last week. So make sure to keep it tuned in there. A cool little thing that you may or may not know that we did update compared to, let's say, like the Helios. We made all of these little holes actually smaller so that you can't have your screws drop through them. So anybody in there, let me know in the chat, have you felt the pain of dropping a screw and it's gone through the shroud and then it rattles in there at the bottom of the cage and you're kind of like, oh man, now I got to go down in there? Or the worst one is it drops through the shroud and it drops inside your power supply, and then you got to take out your power supply, you know, and rattle out that screw so that you can get that screw back out there. You know, I've had that even happen to me. So yeah, it's pretty crazy. Cool little accents right here, the little storage bay, of course, the screwdriver, your little accessories that you can put in down there. Dual 420mm rad support that's in there. You can see some of the lighting effect, right, that's present on there. All the cool little accessories. Even the screwdriver is going to be, of course, red right here. You can see cool stuff like here, like the secondary extension cables. These cables are specifically included there to be able to complement the extended height that you have in terms of the Hyperion and the PSU. There you go, guys. So pretty sweet, right? All right, but pretty cool. All right, let me go ahead and just see any quick questions that came up there. Robert goes, yeah, the new EVA build is lit. I would agree. Let me see. Dage95 goes, going into the PSU is a nightmare for sure. Yeah. Samishita says, I won't say it hasn't happened to me, right? Robert goes, I'm too careful for that. Magnetic tools are the best. Yeah. I mean, I would even say for that, you know, it's still just, I've had it happen. You know, it's just kind of a crazy situation, but sure. You know, I'm a big fan of magnetic tool trays, or, you know, mats, you know, or of course you can have a magnetizer to be able to magnetize the tips on your screwdrivers, things like that. Michael goes, yes, that was done nicely. Screws end up nicely in the bottom. Sweet indeed. Yep, pretty cool. All right, very, very cool. All right, guys, let me go ahead and see. Let's go ahead, I guess, maybe do a couple of PCDIY builders spotlights. Yeah, maybe do some cool builds here. So let me go ahead and bring up and see what I got here for our builder spotlight. All right, give me 1 second here. See what to bring up here. All right. All right. Let's go ahead and see here. Mac notes. Will you the ROG Essentially, I think your question is right. Is will a 1,000 watt Aura Gold be enough for my 4090 build? 100%, no problems. Yeah, keep in mind that the actual transient power demand for the 4090, it's actually lower than the 3090, right? So essentially, if the system could power even a 3090, it actually has a higher power draw. So the 4090 is actually more power efficient and has actually a lower peak power response than the 3090. So a 1,000 watt is 100% going to get you covered in a 4090 system. Even if you had an overclocked 4090, so you have an ROG Strix 4090 and you manually overclocking and you have like a 1300 KS, a 1,000 watt would still be more than enough. You don't have to worry about that. That's a perfect combination at giving you a great foundation to be stable and reliable and more than enough power to power all the components along with the GPU, the motherboard, CPU, you know, your cooling, your storage, and everything else. So no worries in that respect. Kevin notes, I had dropped a screw in my Thor for over a year when I first made my build in my Helios. Yeah. Robert Price goes, yes, 1,000 watt Aura Gold runs my 4090 flawlessly. There you community that a lot of them might even be running those same configurations, already giving you a confirmation. So right there, Robert's letting you know, bam, you can run that Aura Gold and runs my 4090 with no problems, right? Yeah, I would agree with Sabashido's, right, is that only time a 1,000 watt wouldn't be enough is if you're doing some crazy LN2 overclocking. Yeah, really, you'd have to do some really crazy kind of overclocking because you could still definitely do aggressive overclocking. Even actually, I'd say going into like dry ice, like some moderate cascade stuff, things like that, you'd be fine. It's only if you're going to start doing like multi GPUs or you're going to do like specialized unlocked power limits or you're going to kind of get into some really crazy stuff. But again, if that was probably the case, you're probably not looking at 1,000 watt. You're probably looking at, you know, the 12 or even the 1,600 watt base power supplies, right? All right, let's go ahead and see the first build that we're going to go with. I think it's the one that we have featured in the thumbnail. So let me go ahead and pull that one up first here. Let me go ahead and get that one over here. So give me 1 second. I got to scroll through here. So I don't think that I had that one. Here it is. Perfect. Okay. All right, and let me go ahead and just put these quickly in a quick folder. So I can go ahead and pull through these a little bit more quickly. So I believe this is going to be from Nay. Is that right? And so we're going to go back. Speaking Kevin, who just noted talking about his Helios, right? We're actually going to be going to a build that actually utilizes the Helios as opposed to the Hyperion. I'm still a really big fan of the Helios because I love that really big, bold, tempered glass panel that it has on there and the cool kind of ID design on there. It's always interesting to see. Sometimes we have a balancing act from people that do RGB fans and people that don't do the RGB fans, and it affects kind of the different vibe that you have with the Helios because the RGB fans can look cool through the tempered glass, but they take away a little bit, I think, from the pattern finish somewhat sometimes on the build, so it kind of will vary there. But let me go ahead and bring this up here. So we got here, this is going to be our first build. And what's the name here? I think this one, is there a name? We're just going to they put in their post, old school Helios. So we're going to call it that. But if somebody has a different name, let me know what you think the name should be. All right, here we go. Old school Helios. Let's take a look at it. All right. Ooh, I'm liking it. I'm liking it. Already very, very nice and clean. So you can tell the first thing that I talked about right there in this build is that they did not go with RGB fans because you can see that we don't have actually any kind of RGB fan illumination here. So that allows kind of that nice Myron pattern finish to really kind of shine through. It was the same thing with the actual Gundam IP collaboration where we had the Helios, which also had the Gundam mech in there. And I thought it looked really the best when you didn't have those RGB fans behind it, but it could still look cool. Of course, everybody has their own way that they decide to go about it, but I really like that design, right? They also have, of course, we can see this is pretty much a full RG system. They got an RG Thor in there. They did connect the cable. Some people forget to connect this cable, so sometimes this is oddly like a red strip as opposed to, you know, being an RGB or something like that. We can see we've got an ROG Strix 40 series base graphics card in there. We've got an ROG Strix LC cooler, ROG Strix board that's in there, and the only thing is they don't have the native 12-volt high power cable in there, but that's fine. It still looks nice and clean in terms of the overall design. I like the kind of little bit of a synthwave color scheme that we got in here with the pinks, the purples, and the blues. Overall looking quite nice right here, right? You got those classic straps that the Helios is known for, just like our GT502 or GT501, right, where it does make it easier to lift and move the chassis, because especially once you build one of these guys, they can be pretty big. All that I/O that you got there on the front Helios as well. Nice and cleanly done. I mean, nothing, there's literally nothing to negate on here. I mean, when we're taking a look here, and even all the subtle little cable management down here, they really pulled in everything nice and clean. It's quite nice. You do have, of course, that integrated GPU support, but it doesn't even look, I think they are using that GPU support because I believe the arm is slightly extended. So that's kind of one of the nice things. You can see that they're essentially don't have to have any sag because that was already built into the chassis. Although you could use something like the wing wall or like the Herculex, but I like the way this looks. It's very, very nice. And I can really fully see that nice quad zone tail lighting design that we have on the card. There we can see with no RGB lighting on there. Some 2 DIMM configuration, so it looks like they're maximizing their DRAM overclocking. Yeah, and then this is the Strix LC2, because we can tell Strix LC1 is like this one, where it does not have the slash, and the Strix LC2 is the one that has the slash. I also kind of like that they didn't go with a rear RGB fan here, because then you don't have a little bit of the backsplash of lighting that would sometimes hit this IO shroud and might wash this out a little bit. So it's a nice balancing act between actually contrast and having actually little pockets of kind of lighting within the system. Overall, I think this turned out really, really nice. Yeah, I think the build looks good. What do you guys think? What would you name this one? He puts 2 cents builds by collector's store. Okay, let me go ahead and see what we got here in terms of the course specifications. This one was a group posting, so I don't actually have a full submission form. So let me go ahead and just bring it up right here. So let's see here. So this is 13700, and then an ROG Strix Z790-H. Then we have an ROG Strix 4070 Ti, an ROG Strix LC2 360. That's inside of a Helios 850 watt Thor power supply, first generation. Then we have 6000 MT memory from G-Skill, 1 terabyte WD base PCIe NVMe M.2 SSD and SN770. And then he also did put in a contact frame. So he does have the Thermalright contact frame. And for those of you who don't know what the contact frame is, it essentially helps to just kind of mitigate the distribution, right, in terms of the concavity, in terms of the top of the IHS. It's not a bad option if you sometimes want to be able to reduce temperatures. It can help you in that respect, but I always do caution people that if you're going to use a contact frame, be careful upon the installation, because it can actually introduce issues. You can have memory channels that drop out. You can actually have worse DRAM overclocking performance. So I always recommend, it can be tedious, but I actually recommend testing everything fully at stock with no contact frame, making sure everything is working great. And then only after that do you actually go back in and put in the contact frame. But, you know, some people, they want to save that time and do that. But let's go ahead and see what we got right here. Old man Helios, right? Sorry, I'm not sure how to read your username. Waywar3D is noting actually an experience about their Ryujin 360. I would probably say that if you're seeing a reporting issue, keep in mind that there's different ways that you can report the temperature, right? So that we have a default readout, which is happening usually from the socket sense temperature, but then you could also have an ATA64. So your post isn't clear on whether it might be maybe from the ATA64 or from the native readout. Sometimes also if you have other persistent kind of utilities that are pulling what's called the Super IO, which is a controller that's on the motherboard, that can actually lead to issues with irregularities on the monitoring. I haven't personally seen any issues in my testing or from our beta control group, so I have a feeling that it might be more inclined to be based on your OS environment. If you're willing to like install like a virtual machine or something like that, you could kind of test for that. But if you do want to, you can actually go to our ROG forum and the Armored Crate section, and you can actually submit a debug request, so you can actually have them review that. You can record a function within Armored Crate to be able to provide some additional information so that the team could review. But I have a feeling that it could either be tied to maybe you running maybe other applications in the background that are pulling the Super IO bus, right? Or like I said, maybe if you're using ATA64, could maybe be a plug-in factor like there. Either which way, you can feel free to follow up with our team, and they can help to kind of run through a debug review. I love the angle of the picture with all of the ARGB. I would agree, it looks pretty cool. Kit 2000 is the name of it. And then Mike throws up a name. He goes, Classic Cold Steel. I kind of like that. The only thing is that you don't get a little bit of the vibe of the color. I'm not getting color from that name. Whereas like Michael's Kit 2000, you know, of course, if that's giving me some of that Knight Rider vibes, I can kind of feel where I can see some potential color, right, from Kit 2000. But either which way, two cool names, man, and a cool build, man. Gets definitely a thumbs up from me. So nicely done. So pretty cool. All right, let's go ahead and go into our next build. So give me a second here. Go into my Builder Spotlight folder here. What do I got in here? Let's go with a tough gaming build, I think, here. Okay. All right, so here we go. We'll go with this one. So this is going to be from Connor Johnson, Tough Gaming in the North. That is the name. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look here. Let me open up his submission form. And again, anybody that has any general Q&A, feel free. We're still kind of in Q&A section. We started the PCDIY Builder Spotlight early because we didn't have any new products to kind of dive into. So if you have any other questions about any of the kind of ASUS products, product lines, stuff like that, feel free. You can go ahead and ask. All right. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look here. Okay, cool. We can see that we got a Fractal Designs chassis right there. Of course, that nice little wood contrast, of course, with the black. It's pretty cool right there with the little gold accents. That's kind of nice. And then a little bit of an angled shot. We can tell this is actually going to be, looks like a whole Tough Gaming build. So we got everything from a Tough Gaming board, Tough Gaming LC cooler, and then even Tough Gaming base graphics card. And actually, I think from those cables, it's actually going to be even a Tough Gaming power supply in there too. Yeah, the Tough Gaming power supply I absolutely love. They have these really, really nice, what are called fully etched modular cables. They have a nice kind of softness and a little bit of waxiness to them. Nice level of malleability, but still a little bit stiff. For me, I think they're the best inbox cables, 100% on the market for any PSU in its class. It's really, really a great value add, I think, that we have for the Tough Gaming power supplies. So if you're buying something like the 750 watt, the 850 watt, the 1000 watt, it's really, really one of the nice value points. And we will later on even have a 1200 watt for that ATX 3.0 Tough Gaming Gold power supply. Yeah, I can actually see the little Tough Gaming logo down there. But overall, really nicely clean and done. I mean, there's nothing to negate here, right? This is great, you know, PC 101 building, right? Where it's just clean, well laid out. Nothing kind of imposed, nothing forced, just well balanced. And Connor, of course, a great member of the community. He's done multiple builds, so I would expect him to kind of be a par for the course kind of guy. And this is definitely type of my kind of build, just easy, simple, functional, and performant. Nice little swoop down. Now I want to get the feedback from people in the group, right? What is your thoughts, right, in the chat? Are you the over the GPU or under the GPU? Which one is your preference? I think sometimes it actually even depends on the build and it depends on the graphics card. I think for this kind of vibe, I think the under works well. If you went over, you would probably have to do something where like you'd have to round it through the back and you'd kind of go over here and then you'd pull it back and then it would kind of go there, right? And then even then, would you maybe want to use like an angled adapter or something like that? It can kind of get kind of interesting, but I think this works well. I think also the way he swooped the cable also works pretty well right here. It does eat a little bit into the logo, but it probably might be a little bit more problematic to try to flip this and have these have the hose undercut swoop this, right? So where you would see this and then that would swoop over and then it would be on the reversed position mounting. But actually I like the way this looks. It looks quite nice. And there we can see, yeah, I mean, just clean, simple, well laid out. I got nothing to negate there, Connor. You did a great job. But then again, I think every build that I've seen from you always looks great. Oh, there we go. We got Connor, man. Yeah, Connor's, thanks for the feature. Yeah, man. Well, thank you, man. It's well done, right? It's exactly the type of build that I would put together, right? Just clean, functional, well laid out, nice attention to detail. All your cables are well managed, well balanced. And I'd love to see what your thoughts are. Did you like actually those Tough Gaming cables, right? Like, how did they feel for you? Because I think a lot of those things is, I told even our product marketing team, I was like frustrated. I was like, you go to the product page and we don't even have any pictures of those cables. And they're maybe for me, maybe like the biggest value add on that power supply is just actually those cables. I love the way that they look. So let's see. We have feedback from Robert. He says he would go under for the cable. So he's the same way that Connor went ahead and routed it as opposed to going over, right? Michael goes, a shoelace drop licorice wires over the back of the motherboard with a 180-degree adapter. So that's what I was talking about, where you probably have to do a new adapter. I mean, the one benefit is you get a little bit better kind of readability here, but I definitely don't think this looks bad. I think it's fine. Now, the one difference is that the way that this chassis is designed, Some chassis will sometimes have a pass-through point like around here, but you can see that what Connor had to do is he actually had to route the cable all the way back down over here and then run it. So you have that little bit of kind of that pulled snug effect, which is a little bit different where with some chassis, if it's a little bit more straight through, it might seem like just a soft bit more balance, but I think that's okay. I mean, you could play with that a little bit by maybe pulling it out a little smidge, but actually overall, I still think this looks quite nice. The Mac gives some loves. He says, nice build. I would agree. It's a nicely done. Let's go ahead and take a look here at our core components. So let's see what we're running here. So this is going to be, from Connor Johnson. Does the build have a theme? Tough gaming. 3 words used to describe the build is elegant, yet industrial, and tough. I would definitely agree. Does it have a name? Yes, tough in the north. So in terms of the core hardware, we're doing a i5, a 12600K. That's still a great CPU for the performance. I mean, pricing right now on that CPU is actually really great. It's a really great kind of option for building a nice kind of performant gaming system where you're not really limited too much by the CPU. Plus, you've got some nice overclocking margin. Very easy to manage in terms of thermals. And then he's got a tough gaming Z690 motherboard, so the same one that I showed today, right? That has the promo on it, so great board right there. 32 gigabytes of DDR5 6000 MT, then a tough gaming 4070 Ti, then the tough gaming LC240, the ARGB AIO, a tough gaming 850 watt ATX 3.0. That's all inside of that Fractal North chassis, and then he's got a PCIe NVMe 500 gigabyte M.2 SSD. His total build for the budget was about $2,000. What aspect was he most proud of is that the system tuning. Minor overclocks on the CPU and the GPU provide a nice performance uplift, but the system is still very quiet thanks to a custom fan curve. I would agree. Custom fan curves make all the difference in the world in terms of helping to find that right balance, you know, from doing everything from just, you know, watching a stream or checking out some email or looking at a Reddit post, right, to, of course, playing your games, right? Is there anything that would change about the build? No, I would agree. I think it's nice, clean, well done. Nothing that I would change about it. Took him about 2 to 3 hours to put it together. That's pro, really nicely done there. What is the system used for? The system was built for a customer. They will be using it for gaming. Favorite function or feature is he's actually a fan of the Armory Crate driver installation feature. I would agree. I think a lot of people, they have lots of different comments, but it's actually, for me, I've built at this point thousands of systems, and it's so much easier where I can literally just install one app. I go to the utility section, I click my drivers off, I walk away, and I come back and it's going to install all the drivers. It makes it really, really easy. It's nice having all the relevant drivers in one place ready to download instead of having to get each file and then independently unzip them, right? Or decompress them. Yeah, I totally know. I think everybody watching the stream knows the pain point of having to decompress your drivers manually, right? This is where Michael goes, this is where the BTF would have been nice. It looks perfect. Build, I would miss the PSU below, right? Great build for 2K. I think it shows you the balance of why, you know, tough gaming is a great option, right? You can build a really nice, good looking, clean system, right? That still has a nice aesthetic design to it without being super crazy in terms of the pricing, right? So very, very cool, man. Dual thumbs up, Connor, man. Great build. All right, let's go ahead and see what we got next up here in the pipeline. All right. Let me see here. Let me take a look here. What have I got in here? Where did that other folder go? Okay, guess I didn't have that other folder in there. All right, so let me go ahead and check in here and see if I've got maybe one or two that I can go ahead and pull up on this side. So give me 1 second, guys. I'm going to go ahead and jump into our group and see if I've got something maybe kind of interesting that we can. Ooh, this is kind of cool. All right, let's go ahead and we'll go with Wayne's here. So this is from Wayne Berry, actually a new member of our PCDIY group, and this one's actually pretty cool. So we were talking actually earlier about Star Trek, right? So this one's pretty interesting. So this looks like it's a little bit of like a mod actually type build. So let's go ahead and take a look in here and see what we got. Oh, we even got a little bit of video. Ooh, okay. Fancy. All right, let me go ahead and finish loading this up here. Got one or two more images right here. I think there was some definite 3D printing involved in here. And let me go ahead and see if we can share this one here. Let me go ahead here and... All right, perfect. All right, so let me get this one up here. All right, so... All right, so let's go ahead and bring this one up. This is Wayne. Let me go ahead and make a quick name adjustment. Wayne Berry, and I don't know that there's a clear name here that he posted, so let me see here. Yeah, okay, here. So we do have a name. This is going to be the Star Trek TNG era Warp Core PC. All right, there we go. All right, guys. I think that's kind of serendipitous, right, that we ended up having a little bit of Star Trek here for the name, right? So let's go ahead and take a look right here. So right off the bat, we can definitely immediately get that sense, that vibe, right, of the Warp Core, right, PC. So you see, of course, that cylindrical, right, kind of oscillating kind of pattern design, which is so reminiscent of when you talk about kind of a Warp Core, especially at least in the more recent kind of series, right, where you see that. Really, really cool. I like the actual kind of angled take right here, where you can see we've got an open frame chassis design, which is kind of cool because it gives you some depth and dimension here, where you kind of have a front focal point, but then you have two items off to the side, which add almost like a dioramic type of vibe or kind of feel to it, which is kind of interesting. Cool to kind of just give you a different look and feel. Some really, really nice, just kind of subtle details which tie in the overall kind of feel in the mod and the theme altogether right here, where I love this little kind of subtle work to kind of put something around the actual tubing. Right there, you can see, of course, the pump in the reservoir going up here into the radiators. Then you've got another run that kind of goes over here, over the GPU, and then into the CPU. It's also kind of visually cool that he didn't block the GPU. I'm actually a big fan of sometimes only blocking the CPU. A lot of times, if you have a very good cooler already on the GPU, there's no point to add complexity and cost in more runs if you don't need it, right? Where I think the CPU can definitely have kind of like that most benefit, right? Although definitely GPUs can, of course, benefit from liquid cooling, but it also just gives you a little bit of a different aesthetic where it's kind of interesting to be able to see the GPU and then, of course, have the rest kind of cooled. Then you bring it together in this kind of really interesting kind of synthwave color scheme, which is kind of cool, where you've got that purple, then you have the reds, and then you have the grays. Now, definitely, he even added in some iconography there in terms of Star Trek. You can see down here, we've got some cool stuff where you can definitely see some of the finishing here from 3D printing, but there's some nice cleanup that he's done there. But you can see, of course, somebody manned over there in terms of actually a station and kind of engineering, right, by the Warp Core, which is kind of cool. I'm digging that vibe, right? Pretty cool, pretty interesting. So as we kind of take a little bit of further part, we can see right here, we got a dual base graphics card. We've got our hardline runs, some nice little attention to detail. Look at this, water plasma flow, right? With a little directional, a little directional air on it. That's kind of cool. We then have even some nice little stuff, cable combs there on your red cables, kind of all come through together there. That looks to me probably like a tough gaming board, and then we've got a dual series card in there, some team group memory in there. Overall, nice combination of memory, some cool bends and runs in there. It'd be kind of interesting here. So this is interesting. So if we take a look here, I believe probably the tubing, right? Be interesting kind of find out what was the combination there. Ooh, wow, that's actually a cool, really cool shot, right? I really love the way this looks. This, you can see how just sometimes the difference when you go from like a white to like a dark type of scenario, how it totally just gives you different vibes, right? So this is really, really cool, where in, of course, the dark vibes, it really has the kind of feel of like you're looking at like a diorama for like a starship and actually the Warp Core. So really cool. Even the fans don't actually take away from it. They still feel like environmentally that they're part of kind of just like this whirring engine type of engineering portion of the ship and the station. And the red actually comes through nicely, where you have that contrast where the Kyrie color scheme was that not kind of that synthwave or purple, but here we're definitely in the blue and the whites. And then I really like the reds, which just give you a little bit of that nice kind of contrast and color scheme. Pretty cool, right? Let's go ahead and see here just some of the feedback. David's throwing out a wow. Johnny goes, very cool build, right? Michael goes, I love the first thing that came to mind is Doctor Who and the Nellic. Oh, I can see that too. But yeah, I mean, for me, the first thing I saw was Warp Core, but I could see where you could be pulling some inspiration from, of course, Doctor Who. Yeah, David also confirms that, right? Connor goes, this is stunning. Great work on the Warp Core PC, right? David goes, is it weird that I'm hearing the throb of the Warp Core in my head, right? The that would be kind of cool if they did something like that. Pretty kind of cool, pretty interesting, right? But overall, a beautiful amount of work here and attention to detail. Some really kind of nice and just fun creativity that's been put on display in terms of the overall theme. And I think the execution is really, really nicely done. You got your flow meter right there, which is cool. Again, you've got, look at this right here, another little label, Warp Plasma. And I think this is like maybe like manifold or something like that. That's pretty cool. Again, this is just, it's fun. Again, you also see a little engineering character down there with a 3D printed model. It's really cool. I dig this, right? Yeah, you can see right there. Look, even taking the time to go ahead and paint this, adding in some of these elements, that's really, really nicely done. Oh, this is cool. Yeah. Some great shots too. I mean, overall, definitely a very fun and creative build altogether. Definitely credit where credit's due here. Let me go with a split shot here so that we can kind of see, I think, the lit shot and also darker shot, because I think it does it justice when we take a kind of look at both of them. So let me see right here, and we'll put this one kind of side by side. Okay, cool. And let me bring up his submission form. Well, he didn't actually submit. So I pulled it from the group there, but that's okay because he did give us a little bit of details. So let me see if we have the details in there. So again, this is from Wayne Berry, just actually brand new member to our PCDIY group. So fantastic, man. Thanks for joining the group. Thank you also for sharing your build right here. He did actually share some videos. So let me go ahead and see what we got in terms of the video here. All right. So let's go ahead and see what we got there. We saw that one. Oh, here we go. There you guys go. So look, it actually works. That's so cool. Very, very cool. And then here you can see, that's a cool little kind of sequence lighting pattern. That sequence lighting pattern, again, they're kind of with the oscillation of kind of the warp core. And that even kind of, again, that diametric kind of vibe, right, is pretty cool, pretty interesting. Great job, man. Excuse me. I apologize there. I have you as, let me make a correction there. There we go. Apologies on my side there. But overall, yeah, man, I think it gets a serious thumbs up, right? I mean, it's everything that we'd love to be able to see here, right? It's fun, it's creative, it's got a nice attention to detail, cool kind of continuity and consistency within the theme, right? You can definitely see and feel what you were attempting to kind of nail there in terms of the source inspiration, and then kind of just making it all play out. I think it's really nicely executed. The other interesting part that you don't really see here too much is actually you don't really see too many cables, right? You really only just have the cable you can immediately see from the graphics card and then the cable from the motherboard, but still keeping them kind of contiguous in terms of the same color scheme, I think kind of works all the way around. And I think this is kind of interesting too. I think this is a TT chassis, I'm not sure. But right here, you don't have the tempered glass, but I think it works better, right, to not have the tempered glass because you kind of have that direct openness to the overall kind of look and feel for the system itself. So very cool, man. Gets a nice thumbs up from me and definitely a nice feature to be able to showcase here on the PC DIY Builder Spotlight. Let me go ahead and lastly see right here. Some animation on the core would be good. Yeah, so you saw that in the video. There actually was animation right there. Scotty, where are you? Pretty cool. Let me see right there. So Boss goes, a very nice build with an even a nicer theme. I love Star Trek. I thought that the Borg QPC that Linus built some 2 years ago was cool, but this is miles better, or should I say light years? Oh, that's a good one. That's a good one. Yeah, overall, great job, man. Fantastic. So overall, that's going to wrap up this week's PC DIY Weekly Builder Spotlight and our stream. But I'm going to be going through the actual curated folder to kind of make sure that we clear out the entirety of any remainder PCDIY Builder Spotlight submissions that we have. So probably next week we'll have maybe a continued packed in, but we're going to have a lot more updates coming up because we've got a lot of really cool, exciting products that we're still actually getting ready to kick off and release for the remainder of Q4. And I know the long-awaited one that I'm surprised I didn't get any questions about, but I'm going to bring up a photo here of it because I got some new photos. I can't show off all of them, but I got some new photos. Let me see if I have one that I haven't shown you. Let me see here. Which one should I show? Have to watch out which one. Let me see here. We have an upcoming card that I know I've been getting questions about. So maybe this one. I don't even know which one I should show you. I think that's a pretty good one. Okay, yeah. No, there we go. Okay, well, a lot of you guys have seen that angle already. I want to try to show like maybe an angle that you maybe haven't seen. I think we haven't shown that angle before. Okay, so. Yep, this guy is going to be coming in the not too distant future, so make sure to keep it tuned right there. That matrix-based graphics card, right? So pretty cool. We're going to have more information on that in the not too distant future. But again, we're going to have a pretty busy Q4 with tons of product announcements, tons of product releases. So as always, if you guys want to find out about the latest and greatest, everything that we're doing, make sure to go ahead and join us in the ASUS PCDIY group. Amazing community that we have, over 45,000 members. Some great stuff that we're going to be doing in terms of activations and giveaways and some cool stuff as we get ready to jump into next month and also for the remainder of Q4. So you're going to want to make sure to be part of the group for that. And as always, if you guys have, like I said, builds or upgrades, things that you want to be able to showcase, make sure to go ahead and submit them in the ASUS PCDIY Builder Spotlight. You can find a post in our PCDIY group about how you can go ahead and submit so you can get featured here on the stream. As always, it's been great to be able to go ahead and answer your guys' questions and be able to talk about all the cool things that we're doing. So with that, best of luck with your guys' builds and upgrades. Hopefully everybody enjoys their Friday night. Stay safe, stay healthy. And also, if you have Mondays off, right, enjoy your Monday off, man, and take care and take it easy. All right, guys. Bye-bye.